I'm a taxonomist of the Convocation, and I have spent 41 years tending the designations register. It is the oldest continuous record in the known galaxy, 312 years of species classifications, contact protocols, developmental tier assignments, and cross-referencing notations. Every species that has ever been formally surveyed carries a row in this register. Every row carries a designation. Until today, no row has ever been left blank. I am here to blank one. I want to be precise about what the designations register is, because precision is the only courtesy I can offer this convocation now. The register is not a rank. It is not a verdict on the worth of a species or the depth of its civilization. It is an instrument of contact policy, a practical shorthand that tells our surveyors, our fleet commanders, our diplomatic corps, and our trade envoys what kind of engagement a given species can sustain. A Tier 4 emerging primitive is a species that has not achieved faster-than-light transit, has not yet established interstellar communication, and poses no significant hazard to survey vessels operating at standard approach distances. The designation is procedural. It determines how close our ships may come, how openly our crew may observe, and most critically, whether a species is considered a contact risk. Humans carried a Tier 4 designation for 293 years. I have to say that plainly because the number is the accusation. 293 years, 11 successive convocations, 47 separate survey passes, all conducted at standard approach distance, all returning the same notation: emerging, pre-transit, no contact risk. The Velorn Convocation is not a careless institution. We reviewed that designation on the mandated 30-year cycle without exception. And on every review, the Tier 4 entry was ratified, the cross-references were updated, and the row was filed unchanged. We were not careless, we were consistent, and our consistency was the error. There is a particular kind of blindness that only institutions can produce. It is not the blindness of ignorance. An individual can recover from ignorance by acquiring knowledge. It is the blindness of established record, the kind that accumulates across generations of careful, well-intentioned scholars who each inherit a prior entry and find no compelling reason to dispute it. Every convocation that ratified humanity's designation was staffed by serious taxonomists. Every one of them reviewed the 30-year cycle report. Every one of them cross-checked the survey data. And every one of them concluded that the entry was sound, because the previous convocation had concluded the entry was sound, and the one before that, and the one before that. The register had been right about 11,000 species. It had no mechanism for being wrong about one. The first loss was the Care of Combine's Survey Brig uncontested claim, which crossed the HFY threshold in the 416th year of the Common Calendar, to conduct a commercial resource assessment. The humans had no faster-than-light capacity at that time. We know this because 4 separate survey passes had confirmed it within the preceding 30 years. The uncontested claim was carrying a crew of 9, a standard resource mapping array, and a copy of the designations register showing humans as Tier 4. She entered the exclusion buffer at the HFY threshold and ceased transmission at hour 7. There was no distress signal. There was no debris. The convocation reviewed the loss. We noted it as an unconfirmed contact event, updated the buffer recommendation from standard to elevated, and filed the Care of Combine's loss inquiry under administrative correspondence. We did not change the designation. I want the convocation to sit with that. We had one ship gone silent inside human space, no wreckage, no explanation, and our response was to update a buffer recommendation. We told ourselves the loss was anomalous. We told ourselves that a Tier 4 emerging primitive could not have been the cause. We told ourselves this because the register said so, and the register was 300 years old, and the register did not make errors. The Orvan Reach lost the survey tender cartographer's promise 11 years later. Same threshold, same hour of silence, no debris. The Salmir Compact lost 3 prospecting hulls in a single season, 18 years after that. Different approach vectors. Same silence. One of them managed 6 words on the emergency channel before the transmission ended. The words were in no language the Compact's linguists could identify. It was not a human language. It was not any language in the register. By this point, the HFY threshold had acquired an informal designation among fleet navigators that did not appear in any official document. They called it the consideration. I did not know this at the time. I learned it from the testimony of a Salmir fleet officer who addressed the previous convocation, and whose testimony was entered into the administrative record, and then, as far as I can determine, never read again. I have spent the last 4 years reading the administrative record. What I found there is not a mystery. It is a ledger. 42 unconfirmed contact events over 212 years. 42 ships that entered human space carrying a copy of the designations register showing humans as Tier 4 and did not return. Some left debris. Most did not. None left survivors. The buffer recommendations grew and grew and grew, until the approach zone around human space had been quietly expanded 11 times, and still the row in the register read, "Emerging, pre-transit, no contact risk." We expanded the buffer because we knew, at some level, that something was wrong. We simply declined to name it. Naming it would have required us to revise the designation, and revising the designation would have required us to explain the previous 300 years, and explaining the previous 300 years would have required us to say what I am saying now, that we were wrong, and that being wrong cost 42 crews their lives. I have thought carefully about whether any other explanation is available, and I find that it is not. The losses were not navigational errors. The approach vectors were clean on every recovery of telemetry data we possess. They were not equipment failures. The ships that went silent were of varied construction, varied age, and varied origin. They were not statistical noise. 42 events across 212 years form a pattern that any junior analyst could read in an afternoon. The Convocation did not fail to notice the pattern. The Convocation noticed it and expanded the buffer and filed the losses and trusted the register. The designation was not the only error. The designation was the first error. What followed from it was a kind of civilizational momentum, the willingness of every subsequent convocation to accept the existing entry because the existing entry had been accepted before. No one lied. No one falsified. No one looked at the 42 losses and made a deliberate choice to protect the register's reputation. They simply trusted the register because the register had always been trusted, because that is what the register is for. 42 crews trusted it. Now I must speak to the question this convocation was assembled to answer. What designation does humanity carry going forward? I have reviewed every tier in the register's classification framework, Tier 1 through Tier 7, with all subcategories and contact risk addenda. I have cross-referenced the contact event record, the 42 loss files, and every surviving navigation note from ships that approached the HFY threshold and chose to turn back. I have read the one testimony from the consideration's edge that exists in the record, a care fleet commander who brought her ship to within 4 light hours of the buffer, observed what she described only as a quality of attention from inside the line, and immediately ordered a course reversal. Her notation is the only entry in 212 years that does not end in silence or debris. Her notation reads, "This designation is incorrect. It has always been incorrect. Whatever is in there was never becoming, it already was." I find I cannot improve on that. There is no tier in the register that fits what the contact record describes. There is no classification for a species whose developmental appearance does not match its actual capability. There is no notation for the kind of attention that sits behind a boundary and takes its time. The register was built on the assumption that what a species shows is what a species is. Humanity appears to have no use for that assumption. I am therefore not here to reclassify the entry. I am here to blank it. An empty field is not an insult. It is the only honest notation the register can offer for a species that does not fit its categories. It is also, I would submit, the most accurate warning we have ever placed in this record. Every surveyor, every fleet commander, every diplomatic envoy who opens this register and finds a blank row where an entry once stood will ask why the row is blank. They will be told, and they will, I expect, keep their distance. The Convocation ratified the motion without debate. The row was blanked in the presence of the full chamber. The cross-references were removed. The 42 loss files were relinked to the empty field, so that anyone who queries the record will find not a classification but a count. I returned to my office in the archive hall below the chamber, and sat for a long time before I opened the register to confirm the change had taken. The field was empty. 312 years of careful, consistent, well-intentioned notation, and what we had finally managed to write about humanity was nothing at all. I believe that is correct. I believe that is the most truthful thing this register has ever said.